So over the last year, Judicial Watch has confirmed over 2 million ineligible voters have been removed from voting rolls in New York, North Carolina, and California, thanks to our historic litigation efforts. I have some great news for you. Judicial Watch has confirmed through communications with Los Angeles County that the county has removed 1.2 million ineligible names from their voter rolls as a result of Judicial Watch's litigation and federal court settlement that LA County and the state of California entered into a few years ago. Now, this litigation was filed under the National Voter Registration Act, which is maybe you know as the Motor Voter Bill. It was passed during the Clinton administration, and it was designed by the left to get the government to register everybody. And the sop to Republicans and those concerned about having duplicate registrations as a result of the government registering people time and time again was that the states had to take reasonable steps to clean up the rolls. Guess which part of the law the left enforced? The registration part. They didn't want the rolls to be clean because, in my view, they want the extra names there as a cushion if they need to steal elections if necessary. And, you know, that's my blunt analysis of it. And so thankfully, the law allows for private enforcement. The Justice Department, I think, only filed 1 or 2 lawsuits in its entire history on this key law to make sure that election rolls are clean. And certainly it's more important than ever, given the over-reliance on mail-in balloting that requires ballots to go out to people. You want them to have rolls that are clean, or as clean can reasonably be. So in Los Angeles and in California, the rolls were generally a mess when we sued. I think our lawsuit was initiated back in 2017, so 5 years ago. No, was it 5 years ago? What is this? What year is this? 2003? 6 years ago. And we noted at the time, I think that there was 20% of the rolls were dirty. And California, it turns out, hadn't cleaned their rolls. And I don't want to get into detail why they didn't, other than they didn't think they needed to under the law, for 20 years until Judicial Watch came around. And so we sued on behalf of registered voters and our friends at the Election Integrity Project California, which is a public interest group also involved in monitoring California's election rolls. And under the terms of the settlement agreement, Los Angeles County sent almost 1.6 million address confirmations in 2019 to voters listed as, quote, inactive on its voter rolls. Under the law, voters who do not respond to the notices and who do not vote in the following 2 federal elections must be removed from the voter rolls. The settlement also required an update to the state's online MVRA manual, which is the manual that the counties used, to make it clear that ineligible names must be removed and to notify each California county they are obliged to do this. So what happened was we began this process in 2019, and essentially the 2 federal elections have passed. So folks who haven't responded have been removed from the rolls, and it's 1.2 million names. So if you don't respond and you don't vote, it means it doesn't mean you can never register and re-register or vote subsequently, but it means you need to re-register and vote. Otherwise, your name gets dropped from the rolls. And why is it important that the rolls be clean and that they shouldn't have millions of inactive registrants? Because even if you're inactive, you can show up and vote or request a ballot and such. And if you know people are moved away, obviously that's a temptation. That's a pool from which fraudsters can draw if they want to engage in voter fraud. And that's why there's this law requiring the states to have clean election rolls. Now, I guess I shouldn't have to explain that to you, since you instinctively know dirty election rolls can mean dirty elections. The left hates the idea that Judicial Watch has been doing this. And you can be sure they're going to be very upset with the news that we disclosed as the result of this settlement and this process, for which we had to be patient for the time to pass. 1.2 million names were removed from 1 county in California. And so what is happening under the settlement agreement, Los Angeles County was sending us email reports telling us about what was going on. And so we had an email report from January 2022. Maybe we can throw this up on the screen. And it kind of, because you got to look at both to understand the numbers here. The number of active registrations as of January 2022 was 5.438 million, so more or less. The total inactives on that file was 1.672, and it included 317,000 names who had just been, just placed on that list in the last year, at least in 2021 or just before 2022. The number of individuals who hadn't voted in 2 consecutive elections as of 2022 was 1.2 million. 1,207,613 to be exact. There were 814,000 names of people who hadn't voted in 6 years, at least. 685,000 names hadn't voted in 4 consecutive federal elections, so that's 8 years plus. 5 or more consecutive general federal elections, at least half of the names on that list hadn't voted in 10 years or more. So we got that number, right? And then they sent us a follow-up email this year dated, which just came in on the 15th. So what's today? The 23rd? So it just came in last week. So the number of active registrations it's gone up a little bit. 5.625, up from 5.4 last year. The number of registrations in the inactive file dropped to 529,000. Now, just because they're inactive doesn't mean they can be removed under the law, as I've described. The number of registrations placed in the inactive file of the last year, it's dropped 210,000. And these are the big numbers. The number of registrations continuously on Los Angeles' inactive file or showing no voting-related activity for 2 consecutive elections, 0. 3 consecutive elections, 0. 4 consecutive elections, 0. 5 or more consecutive general federal elections, 0. What a victory that is. 1.2 million names have been cleaned off from the rolls. This is a tremendous victory for the rule of law. It wasn't done by the Justice Department. It was done through Judicial Watch. Your support for Judicial Watch has led to a massive cleanup of the rolls in California that will have statewide, potentially nationwide implications in the sense that those elections will be at less risk for voter fraud as a result of this mass cleanup. And I tell you, there's been nothing like this ever done by the federal government. And I guarantee you they'll never do anything like it in the future, unless there's a radical change of leadership. And I tell you, even under the Trump administration, they weren't terribly interested in doing much here. So this is a tremendous victory for the rule of law. As I said, it wouldn't have happened without your support. Our legal team, led by Bob Popper on the election integrity side, has done yeoman's work here. Russ Nobile is on our side too. Eric Lee has done great work. Our 3 attorneys who have been working on this case. This has just been a tremendous effort that took 5-6 years of careful work, litigation, and then being on them to make sure that the settlement was enforced. Now, I know many of you are saying, well, how do you know this is true? Well, I mean, it was sent to us pursuant to a federal court settlement. So, I mean, they'd be really putting themselves at some risk if they're lying about the numbers here. And we have other ways of validating these numbers as well. So trust us on that. But I want you to take a step further back. So this isn't the only positive thing that's happened, because you may recall I told you how in New York City we settled a lawsuit after New York City removed, thanks to Judicial Watch, 440,000 names. And you may recall last year, North Carolina, we ended a lawsuit there because North Carolina, after we sued, removed 430,000 names. So over the last year, Judicial Watch has confirmed over 2 million ineligible voters have been removed from voting rolls in New York, North Carolina, and California thanks to our historic litigation efforts. If I could applaud Judicial Watch, it would be appropriate. Great work by Judicial Watch. Don't you agree? And there's more to be done. We've had previous successes in making sure that Maryland Democrats couldn't rig elections by gerrymandering seats in a way to ensure that only Democrats got elected, something completely illegal under state law. We have an ongoing lawsuit in Illinois challenging Illinois' position that they should be able to, and they have been counting ballots that arrive by mail up to 2 weeks after Election Day, including ballots that haven't been postmarked. We have an ongoing civil rights lawsuit there. And of course, we've got ongoing litigation in Pennsylvania and Colorado to require those states and certain counties in those states to clean up their rolls as the law requires. So we ain't done yet. And you can bet as the new numbers come in of voter registration details for following up the 2022 elections, Judicial Watch will be looking at those details very carefully to decide where and whether to sue or warn people that they need to clean up the rolls. Because at this point, just us warning people gets them to clean up the rolls. That's happened in state after state. It happened in Florida. I know in Pennsylvania, one county, after we sent them a letter saying, what's going on here? You haven't been removing names as you were supposed to. They immediately removed 69,000 names. So I tell you, if Judicial Watch wasn't doing this, our voting rolls would be a mess, an absolute mess. And I told you we settled with California and New York City. Now, they're not exactly the friendliest states and localities when it comes to Judicial Watch on election policy matters, don't you think? But, kudos to them for settling, seeing what the writing on the wall was in terms of the law, and not wasting time and money and just getting the work done and following the darn law. Again, without the help of the Justice Department. So this is further confirmation that Judicial Watch is your watchdog in Washington. It's your Justice Department. I know we're not literally the Justice Department, but when it comes to enforcing the rule of law, we put the Justice Department to shame, certainly on election matter. So it's just great work, great news, and it's going to be hard to match the success of this litigation, but we're going to try. And you can bet, given the left's attack on free elections, fair elections and clean elections by opposing voter ID, by dragging their feet on cleaning up the rolls, through this outrageous ballot harvesting, through unsupervised voting, meaning vote by mail, which is an anathema, in my view, to free and fair elections. There's a lot more work to be done. And Judicial Watch will continue to be the national leader in defense of free and fair elections under law. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like our video down below.